Hello everyone and welcome to Overlooked October, where we look at underrated horror movies each week that deserve more appreciation than their initial run gave them. Each week in October will have a theme to it, and to kick off the month I wanted to revisit movies that gave me nightmares as a kid. Growing up I was afraid of a lot of movies like Poltergeist, The Witches, and even Ghostbusters being a huge one. I'd always watch these movies when I was falling asleep in daycare and had nightmares for months. However, I wanted to pick the one that scared me the most. The one that I had the most recurring nightmares of and try to watch through it, understanding what made me so afraid of it back then. That movie for me is The Monster Squad. This movie is about a group of monster-obsessed kids who find out that their town has become infested with the classic monsters like Dracula, Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, the Mummy, and Frankenstein's monster. To stop them, the kids acquire Van Helsing's book and utilize their knowledge of what can kill these creatures to rid the world of them. This movie is an absolute love letter to the classic Universal Studios monsters and is probably a better crossover than anything we would have seen from that dark universe and what they tried to do with that. Seriously, what the hell was this, Universal? The creatures' looks are tweaked just enough to give them their own unique appearance and update them to look separate from the Universal versions. Reminiscing about the first time I saw this movie, it wasn't so much that the monsters themselves scared me, even though they all definitely had their moments. It wasn't even jarring stuff like how Dracula kidnapped some girls and turned them into vampires. It was this thing. This vortex that just sucked everything up, including innocent people. The thought of how these people would just be sucked into what was seemingly a black hole never to be seen again, spending eternity in limbo, just petrified me as I laid there trying to go to bed. I didn't really pick up on the details about the amulet and how you had to read from the book that was in German at the time, so 5-year-old me thought it could just appear out of nowhere. In the opening, they emphasized how all the good guys got sucked into the vortex rather than the monsters, and when that little girl got sucked in, I just remember having to hide from the TV. After the opening, we flash forward 100 years later to small town USA, where we're introduced to our main characters who are all 80s cliches. You have the main character, the smartass, the fat kid, the badass, the cute kids, the dog. Everyone is here ready to stay the same throughout the whole entire movie. This is the same for all the characters in this movie. You get what you see. You know exactly how these characters are going to react to situations they're put in. What you don't know and what will keep you guessing is what sort of off-the-wall insults they'll use.
See you later, Band-Aid breath.
Come on, don't be chicken shit.
So what? He got shot and a werewolf took his body?
No, you peenhead, he was a werewolf!
I had to rewind that last part several times and ended up turning on the captions as I genuinely thought he said peenhead, but nah, it's pinhead. I don't know why he pronounced it that way, but okay. I didn't really grow up in the 80s, so I don't know how authentic these lines felt, but these children never really felt stiff when they said their lines. They all seemingly played off each other quite well. While we're on the topic of insults, there are some lines that these kids say that aren't worth repeating and would be deemed politically incorrect today, as well as Dracula just straight up calling a kindergartner a bitch. And then there's this line that didn't age well at all.
Hey, Rudy, find some silver bullets.
Where the hell am I supposed to find silver bullets? Kmart?
Oh? They sell bullets at Kmart, bro? You must be some sort of Kmart expert. Well, I wonder all that knowledge of Kmart's gonna get you in the future. Spoiler, nowhere, bud. Anyway, suffice to say, if you've watched The Goonies or any 80s movies following a pack of preteens, you'll know what to expect. However, originality in these characters is not something this movie was emphasizing as a selling point. These cliched characters are about as well established as these classic monsters. We know their strengths and weaknesses well enough from the get-go. The writers are well aware that developing these characters or reinforcing their stereotypes is ultimately a waste of time. Like, the fat kid is literally called Fat Kid throughout the entire movie more than his actual name. And the old man next door is referred to as Scary German Guy. No name at all. This is a place where one-dimensional characters are welcomed with open arms. The only exception to that is the Wolfman, and how in his human form he's actually trying to be put away and warn the police about the monster's plan before night falls and he's turned back. I really enjoyed this angle as it makes it a real tragic villain when they could have easily just written him to be some sort of misanthropic villain or just not focused on his human side at all. Now, this isn't really a movie I'd imagine many would get scared by unless you're under the age of 10, hence why this is a childhood scare for me. So all you people out there who are gonna watch this saying, wow, this isn't scary, you were a real wimp, just cool your jets, boy. Not everything decades old seems that scary now, but I'd still say there's some pretty jarring scenes in this. The werewolf transformation is the first thing that comes to mind, as it's still one of the most effective transformation scenes I've seen with how well that cutaway and the practical effects work together. Dracula's transformation from bat to man has amazing makeup, and that first initial scene with that hairy webbed hand popping out sets the expectations for the rest of the movie. Same goes for all vampires and other creatures that pop up throughout this movie. And I like how even though this is labeled a kids movie, there's moments in the script and screenplay that display a more mature tone.
Man, you sure know a lot about monsters.
Now that you mention it, I suppose I do.
Another thing I appreciate is that this movie doesn't overstay its welcome, nor bores us with any unnecessary details regarding the personal lives of these characters. While nowadays studios would add more scenes with more explanation of things and add setup to each of these characters' lives, I for one am glad this movie did not do that. We're here to see kids fight some monsters, not talk about life in the suburbs or spend time with side characters that don't move the story forward. This movie shows that it doesn't care about unique character development, so it just jumps right into exposition. These characters find the items they need, visit any side characters that will help them in their quest, and have a montage preparing for the fight with some 80s rock playing in the background, yeah! And the few scenes that don't really further the plot are usually hilarious, like mocking a little kid saying there's a monster in the closet when there actually is one in there, or how initiation for this club works. While a lot of these scenes try to end with a quote-unquote punchline, I find this movie's humor is best when it doesn't feel like it's trying or there's a real setup for a joke to take place inside of a scene.
Wolfman's got nards.
Well, granted, there are some elements in the story that are confusing, like how exactly did these items end up here in a small suburb of the United States from Transylvania, or how these monsters even have knowledge of their whereabouts, and why every police officer runs up to these monsters and try to beat them with a billy club. But this isn't meant to be high art, it's meant to be a thrill ride. It's fun to watch these type of kids go up against classic monsters, and when the final showdown hits, it's so worth it. Within the last half hour, all the build-up that happened pays off, and the movie doesn't let up. It seems like everyone involved was having a blast, aside from a few shots I saw of the little kids looking like they were genuinely crying. When you get to that scene where they whip out the business card and say their group name, the movie rolls credits. It doesn't try to overextend and set up a sequel. The movie knows it did what it set out to do, which was to tell a story about kids versus monsters. Nothing more, nothing less. Doing some research, there apparently was going to be a TV show in the works, but there were too many similarities to the It miniseries and they scrapped the idea. However, the writers have teased new ideas for a show earlier this year, so anything's possible. Regardless, I'm glad I revisited this movie as I feel it's perfect for getting into that Halloween spirit. Released in 1987 and directed by Fred Decker, this movie had an estimated budget of $12 million, but only made back a dismal return of $3.8 million at the box office. If I had to guess why, I'd say that this movie was a hard sell to audiences. Parts of the script make it seem kid-friendly, even probably trailer footage. Other parts tend to have these kids swearing and insulting each other, pushing it to a PG-13. I keep thinking back to that scene where Sean is up on the roof watching a slasher movie play at the drive-in from afar because his dad couldn't take him. And I think these are the types of kids this movie was made for. Preteens who are just like the main character that love horror and would sneak into R-rated movies or beg their parents to take them to see these movies. So I believe it was more of a tough sell, as people older than 13 might think it'd be too kid-friendly based on the trailers, and people under 10 would be scared like I was. Luckily, thanks to home video sales, it found a cult following. It even spawned a documentary called Wolfman's Got Nards, going into the impact that the Monster Squad had, including cast and crew and other celebrities of the horror genre. This is definitely more recommendable to people nowadays due to the success of Stranger Things and 2017's It, where it's set in the 80s and they fight monsters. There's more nostalgic value as well as those sweet practical effects in every 80s horror. Seriously, the 80s had the best makeup and practical effect work in the horror genre. Movies like The Blob, The Thing, The Lost Boys, The Fly are all excellent, and I believe Monster Squad fits in with the rest of them. What makes the Monster Squad stand out from stuff like It and Stranger Things is how there hasn't been another crossover movie with classic monsters since. Sure, there have been a couple kids fighting monsters movies that have appeared recently, but nothing has ever been able to compare to the scares and story of the Monster Squad. This movie is unapologetically 80s and wears its influences on its sleeve, even the main character having it displayed proudly across his t-shirt, and has a fun time with familiar characters. As of now, it's currently streaming on Amazon Prime and is available to rent for $3, so if you want to see classic monsters cross over, fight a ragtag team of kids, and have a fun time watching, I'd recommend this one. It's a great starting point for this Halloween and it deserves more love. If you have kids and feel like they could tolerate the scares in this one, go for it. Just make sure that they aren't 5 years old like I was, because I still think back to that vortex from time to time. My fear was not invalid though, because, a black hole could have appeared in our galaxy and I could have just reacted with, hey, this is just like Monster Squad. Anyways, thank you all for watching. If you like this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe, as we still got more movies to cover this October. Tell me what movie scared you the most as a kid in the comments below, and maybe we'll have like a group therapy session down there about it. Next week we're going to be covering a movie from the anthology subgenre, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be a real